The wind had risen into a relentless howl by late afternoon, whipping across the mountains like an invisible predator. Snowflakes cut at Jacob Harrison's face as he trudged through the drifts, each step sinking into the powder until his legs ached. The path that led to the ridge above his cabin was nearly indistinguishable under the thick blanket of white, and the storm had turned the world into a featureless landscape of gray and silver. His breaths came in short, misty bursts that froze almost immediately against his whiskered face, and his coat, though heavy, offered only limited protection against the cold. He had been out checking the northern fence line, ensuring the cattle hadn't strayed too far, but the storm had arrived faster and fiercer than he had anticipated. He had grown accustomed to harsh winters over the years, but even he had never underestimated the wrath of the mountains. Then, through the blizzard's dizzying swirl, he saw her. At first, Jacob thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, shadows shifting in the snow, the reflection of ice on tree branches. But as he drew closer, the figure solidified into a small, frail woman huddled near a gnarled pine. She shivered violently, her clothes soaked and torn, and snow clung to her hair in frosty clumps. She looked as though she had been wandering the storm for hours, perhaps days, and the sight of her made his stomach churn with a mixture of fear and anger. Whoever she was, she wouldn't survive long if she remained out here. Jacob called out, his voice rising above the roar of the wind. Hey, can you hear me? Come on, stay still. His words seemed to carry, though the blizzard tried to swallow them whole. She lifted her head weakly, her wide, terrified eyes meeting his. They flickered with recognition and desperation, and he could see the frost on her lashes and the blue tinge of her lips. She tried to speak, but only a weak, broken whisper escaped. Jacob's heart tightened, dropping to his knees. He pulled his coat off, ignoring the sting of cold as he wrapped it around her trembling body. Don't fight it, he said, trying to calm both her and himself. You're freezing. You need warmth. Her body pressed into his chest, seeking protection and comfort, and he felt the fragile weight of her in his arms. Her small frame seemed almost unreal, so delicate against the storm's fury. I didn't know where to go, she whispered, barely audible. He left me. Jacob's jaw tightened as a wave of anger coursed through him. He had heard the rumors. The neighboring rancher had brought a mail-order bride from the east, and no one had seen her since. The town had shrugged, assuming she had disappeared into the wilderness of her own accord. But seeing her here, abandoned and nearly lifeless, made him furious. Come on, he said firmly, lifting her carefully. I've got you, just stay with me. Every step was a battle. The snow reached halfway up his calves, and the wind pushed against him like a solid wall. He could barely see more than a few feet ahead, but he kept moving, guided by instinct and determination. Her body trembled violently against his, and he felt the chilling weight of her fear and exhaustion. He wrapped her tighter in his coat, shielding her as best he could, his own body numbed by the cold, but focused solely on getting her to safety. When he finally reached the cabin, he kicked the door open with his boot, letting a rush of warm air meet them. Jacob laid her down in front of the hearth rug, carefully removing the snow from her coat and wet clothes. He set to work immediately, lighting the fire more fully and piling on logs until the flames roared, and then wrapping her in blankets. Her small body pressed against the soft layers as she shivered, exhausted but alive. Jacob ran water for a bath, careful to make it warm but not scalding, helping her to the edge so she could soak her frozen limbs. She shivered violently in the water, every muscle taut with cold, and he remained close, keeping her steady and offering quiet reassurances. It's okay, he murmured. Just breathe. You're safe now. He worked silently, stripping off his own wet layers, tending to the fire, and preparing a small meal broth, bread, and cured meat. The cabin smelled of smoke, warmth, and hope, a stark contrast to the cold wilderness outside. Hours passed, and finally, after a long soak in dry blankets, she fell asleep by the fire, the trembling in her body slowing to occasional shivers. Jacob watched over her, his own exhaustion settling into his bones, but he could not rest. He felt a deep, protective instinct he had never known before, a need to ensure she was not abandoned again. Through the night, he kept a quiet vigil, listening to the storm's fading roar outside and the gentle crackle of the fire. Each time she stirred in her sleep, he adjusted the blankets, ensuring that every inch of her body was shielded from the cold. He did not know her story fully, but he knew enough. Someone had left her to face the world alone, and he would not allow that cruelty to continue. By dawn, the storm had finally begun to subside. The world outside was still white and harsh, but the wind had lessened, and a pale light filtered through the frost-covered windows. He looked at her sleeping face, pale but peaceful, and realized that the blizzard had brought them together in a way neither could have anticipated. The woman he had found nearly frozen in the storm was now safe, alive, and within the walls of his cabin, where he could ensure she stayed that way. Jacob knew that her journey had not ended with the storm. There would be questions, challenges, and perhaps even resentment toward him for intervening in a situation he did not fully understand. But he also knew that at that moment, none of that mattered. Survival mattered, and hope mattered, and he had given her both. The night had been long and cruel, but in its aftermath, Jacob felt the first stirrings of something unfamiliar: responsibility, yes, but also connection. As he tended the fire. One last time before attempting a brief rest, he promised himself silently that he would not let anyone abandon her again. The blizzard had revealed the depths of her despair, and he had witnessed firsthand the fragility of life in such merciless conditions. But more importantly, he had also glimpsed her resilience. Even in the grips of near death, she had clung to life, and now, under his care, she had a chance for warmth, for safety, and perhaps, one day, for happiness. Jacob settled into a chair by the hearth, the fire casting flickering shadows across the cabin. Outside, the wind still whispered through the mountains, but inside, there was a fragile peace, a small sanctuary against the storm. He watched her, breathing steadily in sleep, and felt a quiet determination settle over him. Someone had failed her, but he would not. She was here now, and he would see to it that she survived, that she thrived, and that she never felt the icy loneliness of the blizzard again. The storm had finally passed, leaving the world beyond the cabin coated in a pristine layer of snow that sparkled under the early morning sun. The mountains, once gray and forbidding, now seemed almost gentle, their peaks outlined against the pale sky. Jacob Harrison stood at the edge of the porch, squinting into the light, his breath rising in soft clouds. The world was silent, except for the occasional creak of the cabin settling in the cold and the distant call of a lone crow. The night's blizzard felt like a distant nightmare, yet he knew all too well that without his intervention, that nightmare could have been Clara's end. Inside. The warmth of the fire wrapped around her like a protective embrace. Clara Bennett stirred in her blankets, her eyes blinking against the sudden brightness. The remnants of the night's terror still etched in the lines of her face. Her hair, once matted with frost and snow, now fell loosely around her shoulders, catching the sunlight in soft auburn tones. She shifted slightly, feeling the softness of the blankets and the solid warmth of the cabin. Slowly, she became aware of Jacob's presence, his figure towering near the hearth, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. Morning, he said quietly, offering her the cup. His voice was gentle, measured, a stark contrast to the roaring winds of the night before. She took it with trembling hands, the warmth seeping through her fingers, warming her from the outside in. The tea's heat seemed to reach deeper than her skin, into the coldness that had gripped her spirit for so long. She sipped carefully, letting the liquid anchor her to the present, to the safety she had found here. I don't even know your name, she murmured, her voice fragile but gaining strength with each word. Jacob, he replied simply, his eyes, steady and attentive, never left hers. And you? Clara hesitated, glancing away for a moment as if unsure whether to reveal her true identity. The memories of abandonment still raw. Clara Bennett, she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Jacob nodded. Well, Clara, you're safe now. You're not going back out there. Not in that storm, not ever. His words were firm, carrying an unspoken promise that her life would no longer be left to chance or cruelty. Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she clutched the cup of tea as if it were a lifeline. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't think anyone would care. Jacob's jaw tightened slightly, a flicker of anger crossing his rugged features. People can be cruel, he said quietly, but that's over now. You're here, you're alive, and I'll make sure you stay that way. Over the next few days, Clara began to recover. She stayed wrapped in blankets by the fire at first, her body regaining warmth slowly. But Jacob insisted she move, stretch, and begin to engage with the cabin's routine. At first, she was hesitant, uncertain of her place in this life she had stumbled into. But the kindness in Jacob's eyes gave her the courage to try. She helped with small chores, feeding the animals and carrying water, each task a tentative step toward regaining a sense of normalcy. Jacob guided her patiently, never rushing, never pressuring, letting her find her rhythm at her own pace. As the days passed, Clara began to open up. She spoke of the mail-order arrangement, of promises made and broken, of the loneliness and fear she had endured. Her husband had sent her across the country with vague assurances of a home, a life, a partnership. But when she arrived, she found a cold house and an empty man. She had wandered aimlessly, trying to survive in the harsh winter, the blizzard, the cruelest test of all. Her voice, though quiet, carried a strength beneath the fear, resilience that had kept her alive despite the odds. Jacob listened without judgment, understanding the depth of her pain and the betrayal she had endured. He offered guidance when needed, shared the small comforts of life on the ranch, and let her know, without saying it outright, that she could trust him. Slowly, the fear in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity about the life she might build here. Spring arrived subtly, melting the snow into streams that ran along the ridges and through the valleys. The world outside became vibrant with new growth, and the cabin felt less like a refuge and more like a home. Clara learned to tend the garden, to care for the animals, and to handle the daily tasks that made life on the ranch both challenging and rewarding. Jacob watched her transformation with a quiet pride, marveling at how someone who had arrived so fragile and broken could adapt, survive, and even thrive. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Clara and Jacob found themselves standing near the barn. She laughed softly at a playful calf, the sound light and genuine, a stark contrast to the fear and despair she had carried when Jacob had first found her. He smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun, a deep, steady satisfaction at seeing her regain life. I can't believe I'm here, Clara said softly, turning to him. Her eyes reflected the colors of the sunset, and for a moment, Jacob saw vulnerability, hope, and something he couldn't quite name. I feel like I have a life now, like someone finally cares. Jacob placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. You do, you have a life, you have me. And this, he gestured to the cabin, the mountains, and the land stretching around them. This is yours too, if you want it. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and a cautious joy that had been foreign to her for so long. She realized that the blizzard had been cruel, yes, but it had also been a turning point, a moment that had brought her to safety, warmth, and the possibility of a life she had never dared to imagine. As evening fell, the two returned to the cabin, settling by the fire that had become a constant source of comfort. Clara wrapped herself in blankets, leaning back into the cushions, while Jacob tended to the fire, ensuring it burned steadily. The outside world was quiet, the remnants of winter fading under the promise of spring. For the first time in months, Clara felt a sense of belonging, a security that went beyond the warmth of the fire or the safety of the cabin walls. In the quiet of the evening, with snow melting beyond the windows and the mountains bathed in fading light, Clara spoke again. I don't think I ever believed someone could just care, not like this. Not without asking for anything in return. Jacob shook his head slowly. It's not about asking, he said. It's about doing what's right. You were left alone, abandoned, and I couldn't let that happen. You deserve better than that, Clara. She looked at him, her expression a mix of wonder and gratitude. The warmth in her chest matched the fire, growing steadily, filling the spaces that fear and despair had once occupied. The trust between them was still fragile, a delicate thread woven from shared hardship and kindness, but it was growing stronger with each passing day. Jacob glanced out the window, the mountains glowing under the last light of day, and felt a quiet certainty settle over him. The blizzard had brought them together, but what had followed, the care, the patience, the shared life, had created something deeper. It was more than survival. It was connection, hope, and the promise of a future neither had expected. As night fell fully, they sat together in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the cabin warm and secure. Clara rested her head on her knees, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in years, and Jacob watched over her with the unwavering resolve of a man who had seen the fragility of life and chosen to protect it. The past's cruelty had brought her to the edge, but now, in this small cabin in the mountains, she was safe, alive, and beginning to truly live. The night stretched on, quiet and still, the world beyond the cabin held at bay, and for the first time in a long while, Clara felt she could finally breathe, not just to survive, but to exist, to hope, and to embrace the life that had been given back to her. Jacob knew that this was only the beginning, that many challenges might come, but in that moment, they shared a rare and precious truth. The blizzard had not only saved a life, it had sparked a new beginning, one built on trust, care, and the possibility of something beautiful yet to come.